Hello, and welcome to Bare Bones Wargaming, a show with no frills, no bells, no whistles, just a man, a camera, and his game. I'm your host, Tim Korchnoi, and on today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at a brand new game that literally just came out, The Manhattan Project 2, Minutes to Midnight by Minion Games. This literally showed up on my doorstep yesterday morning. Now, in this video, what I'm going to do is basically show you how to play it. I'm going to do some sample turns and go through the mechanics, basically give you an overview of how the game played. A little bit of a session, I guess you could say, too, but basically just give a general idea so that those of you who are interested in the game, you can decide if this seems like this is something for you or not. Very briefly, the game is basically about nuclear deterrence, to be honest. You score points by building different weapon systems, by developing technologies, and preparing yourself for the inevitable conflict. Now, what I'm playing here is just basically the generic standard game. The game also comes with some country cards where you can be like Germany or the United States or the United Kingdom and have certain advantages to that. But for this game, I'm just sticking with a very basic intro game. Here, just going to have three countries. Going to have Mr. Orange over here. Over here, Mr. Green in the conservatory. Oh, sorry, wrong game. Mr. Green and Miss Blue up here in the top. So we're just going to dive right in and explain to you how a turn works. And as I go through, we'll talk about the different things that are on here, the different information pieces. But again, just kind of an immersive approach to this. So let's get started. So first of all, on your turn, when it is your turn, and I'm marking my turns here with my big giant green die. For those of you who might have already noticed, I also have, as kind of a nod to past games there, I have my Super Germ to keep my Miss Blue and Mr. Orange pieces separate. The hardest thing about doing multiplayer solitaire is keeping everybody's stuff organized and split up. And up here, of course, I also have some dice to help me remember exactly the turn order in this game. Although in the game it goes clockwise, and I've tried to do that here. So on each turn, basically you have two choices of what you can do. You can either build a building. You can see up here we have the building market. And the building market has different types of buildings, factories, and research labs, and ABM launchers, etc. For those of you who are familiar with Nations, you'll notice it is set up the same way as that game. You've got each one of these rows that has a cost to it, so everything in each row, $1, $2, $3, etc. So you can choose to build a building if you wish, and then you can do one or two worker placement actions. Now the worker placements, you can either place them here on this community board, the worker assignment board for different things, or you can place them in your buildings once you have them on your spaces. And eventually, when you manage to get spies, these guys in the hat and glasses, you can place them on other people's stuff too, to basically get access to their technology. The other thing you can do on a turn is retrieval. Once you have your workers out, either all of them or some or none, you can then basically call them home, if you will, or put them into action, and they can go ahead and do the things that they're supposed to do depending on where they're located. So again, we're just going to jump right in here and start off here with Mr. Orange. Now Mr. Orange decides the first thing he wants to do is indeed build a building. So he is going to build a research lab. Now the research lab tile, like most other tiles, once you get the hang of the rules, they have a little coding on there to remind you what they're able to do. Now anything you build, you always take it and just place it in any free spot in your country. And then you pay the cost back to the general supply. Then you can do one or two worker placements after that. Now, we say worker placements because it can either be one worker, like this one icon here, or if you have enough, you can also place three people into here. That also counts as a placement. So it's not the number of workers, it's the number of placements. So the first thing that Mr. Orange wants to do is get some more folks mobilized in his country. Now, any space that has a question mark, like this space here, you can put any kind of worker that you want, whether it is your laborers you start with or your generals, politicians, and spies later on. So if there's any cost, there's a $2 cost here, you pay the cost, and you place him on that space. Now, once the space is taken by someone, No one else can place anything there. So that's his first worker that he's going to place. Now, Mr. Orange is also going to get some politicians, because politicians should be useful for taxation, but also they can be useful when it comes to dealing with getting influence in third world countries. So he's done 2 worker placements, so his turn is over. So now we switch over here to Mr. Green. Now, like most games of this type, whoever's the first player, that they have an advantage in going first, so then the other players get some compensation. Mr. Green has an extra $1. Miss Blue has an extra worker to start with. So Mr. Green decides, hey, I don't want to fall behind in the research lab arms race, if you will. So he's going to buy a research lab, pay his $1 to the general supply, and now he can place his workers too. Now, Mr. Green has decided he also wants to mobilize his people as quickly as possible, so he's going to fill this space, spend $3 in the process, and he's going to place another worker of his as well, and his other worker, he's going to put him on the research lab because he wants to be able to activate that research lab when it comes time for retrieval. So, Mr. Green's turn is complete. Now we come over here to Miss Blue. Now, Miss Blue is taking a look around and looking at the circumstances and decides, you know what, it's a lot of cost here to do this. Plus, it would get you 4 workers, but she only has 2 that are left, the general one. So it's kind of not a good investment because basically, even though it says 4, she would only get those 2. So what she's going to do instead is she too is going to keep up with the research arms race and get a research lab and pay the $1 for the research lab as well. Excuse me. And now she's going to take one of her workers and place it down here in taxation. Now again, it is a question mark, so she is able to freely do that. And with her second worker, she's actually going to try and plan ahead and get a politician as well. So that is the end of her turn. So we're back over here to Mr. Orange. Now Mr. Orange is going the second time around here. Mr. Orange decides, you know what, got to keep up with the arms race here. So he is going to build a building and build a factory and pay his $2 for the factory. Now factories are special. If you look here at the building board, I'll kind of zoom in here close up. As you see, factory construction, you get some bonuses. You get to advance your technology for your sub or bomber 1 space and take 1 fighter squadron to help defend your sky. So Mr. Orange is going to go ahead and advance his bomber technology. Now why bomber instead of sub? Well, basically because these colored tokens here are scoring opportunities that will come later in the game. Each one is color-coded for different things. Yellow is ICBMs, the brown is Third World, green is bombers, and blue is subs. And since bombers are going to come first, Mr. Orange decides to go ahead and upgrade his technology there with the little light bulbs, which I particularly think are kind of cool. So, he also, though, does not want to fall behind. Oh, I'm sorry. He also gets a fighter squadron as well. So he'll play that here in his general supply materials too. Now he has 1 more worker that he can go ahead and place. So he's going to place that worker on the research lab, and then that's the end of his turn. Now Mr. Green, seeing this factory being built, he's not real keen on that idea. So he's going to do the same thing. He's going to build himself a factory, put it in an empty space in his country. He gets 2 coins. He also gets the fighter squadron. And he too will go ahead and increase his bomber technology to prepare for later. Now Mr. Green also only has 1 individual that is left that he can put on the recruitment areas. Now he's going to go ahead, and Mr. Green's decided he's going to go ahead and prepare for the future also, but long-term future, he's going to put this here, and again, it's a question mark, so he can put anybody here and turn this guy into a general. That takes us to Miss Blue. Now, Miss Blue is taking a look at the scoring track and said to herself, now wait a minute. I know the factories are important, but the factories are also expensive right now. Only factories left are at a level 3. However, missile silos are going to be the first thing to be scored. So, Miss Blue decides she's going to spend $1 and build a missile silo in her country. Now, of course, a missile silo is only good once you put nukes in there. Otherwise, well, let's face it, a missile silo is nothing more than a hole in the ground. So, she'll need to load that up with some nukes at some point here. Now with her last two workers, Miss Blue is going to go ahead and activate her research lab. And she's also going to put a worker on her missile silo. And that is her turn. Now, at this point, and again, I'm kind of doing this just very generically, just to show you how the game works. Now, at this point, basically all players have reached the level where they have no workers left to place, so now we do what's called a retrieval turn. Now, retrieval, you're going to pull your people in. You can pull them in any order that you want, and the order sometimes is very, very important. That's part of the strategy of this game. So you can pull them in any order that you want, and they get you certain functions. And what I'll do is I'll go over each of the functions as I do them, again, just to kind of show you through an immersion process how the game works. So we're up here now with Mr. Orange, and Mr. Orange is going to go ahead and do a retrieval phase. Now, he's going to start with his recruiting. So when you retrieve, you take your worker and you put them back on your track and fill the spaces back in. Now, his was a recruitment. So with the recruitment one, you're going to basically go ahead and move your people up 1, 2, and then take some of your laborers, your basic workers, from your general supply and fill up your track. So that's his first move he decides to do. Now, this guy is being turned into a politician. Now, when you educate somebody, that worker goes back to the general supply, and ta-da, you turn him into a politician like this, for better, for worse, I guess you could say. And he goes in the space on the track. Now, this politician also comes with $1, so there's an extra benefit to recruiting him. Last thing Mr. Orange is going to do is activate his research lab. Now, most of the buildings have choices, and in the rulebook, it's very, very clear, and I'll show you here a nice shot of the rulebook. It's very clear what you can and cannot do. The other nice thing I like about the rulebook is the examples. You can see here on this page, you know, the examples are full color. There's an example for every single type of action. Wonderfully done. Just a fantastic rulebook. Very, very impressed with this. When I was finished reading the rules yesterday, I really had no questions, big questions on what to do here. So with the research lab, we'll retrieve our worker, and now we can either collect $2 or we can increase the technology level of one of our items. So Mr. Orange has decided that he's going to get his $2 because he is after the money. So that's what he wants. He wants the money. And now notice when your retrieval turn is done, your worker track is completely full up to your little woodman, if you will, there. So that turn is done. Oh, almost forgot. I'm sorry. Every time you move or do a retrieval action, this marker moves up 1 space. Now here on the track, on the spaces, there are different symbols. There are dollar symbols and nuclear symbols. So when you're the person that moves into that track, you get the bonus. The only way you don't get the bonus is if it's covered up. So Mr. Orange also gets another $1, which is good because he was very much after the money, so to speak. Now, Mr. Green is up next. And Mr. Green will also do a retrieval turn because, again, he has no other people to put on here. So the first thing he'll do is do some recruiting. Now, he gets 3 people to add to the track. So 1, 2, 3. That bumps all the way up over here up to the 7. And he gets 1, 2, 3. Now, again, the order can be very important because perhaps I would have wanted to educate this worker into a general to return him to the supply to then be able to recruit him or to bring him in as a laborer again later. So educate this man here, and Mr. Green turns him into, ta-da, a general. So right there is the general, and he will take his place on the track. And Mr. Green also has a man on a research lab, so he's going to bring him back. But what Mr. Green's going to do is he's going to start to prepare for this whole ICBM showdown. So what he's going to do instead is increase the technology of his ICBM up to level 3 here to prepare for battle. And this marker moves forward on the track to the 2 space because he did a retrieval action. You really should do that at the beginning, so I'm just kind of catching myself here. Again, the perils of playing multiplayer solitaire. And another nuclear warhead is added to the arsenal of Mr. Green's country. And again, as always, you can tell when the track is full, that means that you're done retrieving everybody, because you should never have more individuals out on the board than what you can fill your track back up with. So up here to Miss Blue. Now, Miss Blue is going to go ahead and do the following. She's going to get her taxation, so she's going to bring this guy back home, and she's going to get herself $3. However, if you notice on that space, there's also a tiny little 1, because when you use that space, yes, you get the 3, but all your opponents also get $1. I don't know if this is supposed to be like foreign aid subsidies or something, hedging your bets kind of thing, but that is the way that particular one works. So, brought him home, got the money. This guy, going to turn him into a politician. So we'll take the politicians here, and I just use these little cups to kind of keep my people organized. Just a habit of mine from wargaming. I do the same thing with a lot of my pieces as well. So he's been turned into a politician. Now, with the research lab. Now notice the order here. Miss Blue's going to go with the research lab first, so she can increase her ICBM technology. So we will move this marker up 1 space on the ICBM track. That's because when she activates this worker on the ICBM silo, she then can add nuclear warheads up to the value of the ICBM, which right now is 2. So that puts 2 warheads there for her, and she is getting ready for that big ICBM showdown. And look at that, I did it again. There goes the marker though, and it does give the $1 to Miss Blue. So Miss Blue's war chest is pretty good too. But Mr. Green doesn't have the money. He's going to have to come up with some other plans here soon. But with his general, he might have some other ideas in mind. So that's basically the 2 basic turns. Again, the mechanics are not very complicated in this game. The strategy, though, there is a ton of strategy going on here. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more whenever I do the next video. Now, my plan for this is the next video I'm going to start closer to the scoring so that you can see how the scoring is done. Scoring is done when you get that far. You get these little scoring tiles that give you directions on how to score things, what you're trying to do to get yourself victory points. So at this point, I'm going to end this particular segment of Bare Bones Wargaming. And again, I'll pick up again later on when I'm closer to a scoring round to kind of show you how that works. Because